Any more patches coming for Empire?
Yeah.
Patches.
Okay. I can't, ironically to that one, I can't say yes and I can't say no. We've got a situation with Empire, whereas if we get the time and resource to do another patch, like if there are enough free people on the team with enough like time window for it, then we will certainly revisit it and do one. It's our aim to do another one if we have the time and resource to do it. So the answer is we want to, but it's a case of whether the business realities will allow us to do it. And so we'll see the answers there, but we would want to. So, cross fingers. For anybody who saw that from the wrong angle, I wasn't swearing at it. That was me crossing my fingers. Cool.
Elite units in the east.
Yes.
Coming, joining.
What day is it?
Today?
Yeah, what date is it? 28th? 29th?
29th.
29th. Ask me that question again in a few days. But yeah, it's potentially en route, yeah.
Talk about New York.
Yeah, something we can talk about in New York in a few days. But yeah, so hopefully that sort of answers that question.
So this game is it's built to be moddable and all that stuff, right?
It is to a degree, but we should, for the sake of the TWC fans and everybody else who's, into the modding scene and everything, we've got to be honest and upfront about this, right? We are not, other than the unit editor, we're currently not planning on shipping tools for Napoleon moddability, right? Napoleon is moddable in as much as the code is accessible to be modded. There are areas of it which are scripted, so you can get in there and change the values and change behaviors and stuff. But it will be a case of, kind of the community poking around in the code, finding out what they've got access to and doing it. We are always aiming to make sure the game is moddable and the code is accessible to do that. But there is usually a cut-off point where we can't make certain areas of the game open to the public. And that's not for, the reasons of, I don't know, like selling DLC or something.
Yeah.
The reasons is actually because it's intellectual property, it's commercial proprietary, which means it's basically like anybody, you don't want people to reverse engineer your software, essentially. So the answer is yes, it will be moddable, Napoleon will be moddable, but we're not billing this as the most moddable Total War game ever, or anything like that, and the unit editor at the moment is the only tool we're planning to release post-release, but the game is moddable in the sense that the other Total War games have been moddable. So please go ahead, give it a crack, and see what we can get out of it, because it was designed around that idea.
How much do the unit uniforms change over the years? Because, that period saw a drastic change in uniforms from the beginning toward the end.
A good example would be that the French Revolutionary Infantry in the Italian campaign start out with no shoes.
Right.
Because they're broke and they're poor, and they've just come out of revolutionary France and there aren't enough boots to go to the front line. And of course, by the time we reach the second campaign, at which point Napoleon's reformed the military, he's given it a greater sense of self-worth and self-respect. They have this new kind of Republican uniform system. Then you start accessing some of what you would call the decently recognisable French revolutionary troops. By the time you reach the final campaign, the European campaign, you've got access to troop types which are definitively French, with this kind of tunic thing and everything. And you've also got access in the Europeans' cases to Austrian and the British troops of the same kind of ilk. So you'll notice the uniforms changing as you move, but that's mostly because you're getting access to different types and levels of unit as you move along.
Like in Medieval 2, when you had units march on campaigns, eventually your metal armor uniform starts to get dirty.
Yeah.
Is it Napoleon, or like what do you?
Yeah, we have some environmental effects during battle affecting the units. So they'll get in some cases they get a bit dusty, they get a bit covered up and all the rest of it. But we've actually gone more down the route of getting more unit variety as opposed to giving more unit effect, if that makes sense. So you'll notice there are a lot more units on the higher end systems when you've got your settings up. You'll notice there are versions which have got honour badges and haven't, lapels buttoned on different sides, or this many buttons or that many buttons. So we've gone for a lot more variation in the units as opposed to making the units, say, dirty or anything else. They are basically affected by the environment, but the sort of focus has gone on making sure they look graphically different. So that's kind of where we've gone with that.
I noticed a lot of debris and plants flying across the battlefield.
Yeah.
Wind damage, going to affect firing?
Yeah, we've got the weather conditions are much more closely tied in now to the way that the guys act and kind of play on the battlefield. So when it's like pissing with rain, or it's you've got the rain driving in one direction or something like this, you'll notice the smoke will all drift off in the same kind of location. It will cause kind of thick pools of smoke in certain locations, which will obscure the visibility of certain troops, depending on if they're downwind or upwind. So that kind of thing will play, into the game. It's fairly kind of minor in as much as it kind of maybe does 1 or 2 points difference, but the kind of weather effects stack. So if you've got, if it's raining and if there's heavy smoke on the ground and it's drifting downwind, you're going to get kind of accuracy problems, you're going to get misfire problems, so it starts to become cumulative. So there's no one effect which will make a huge difference, but when 2 or 3 things begin to combine against you, it can, very quickly lose you a battle if you're not careful.
I noticed there's some dead bodies lying on the battlefield when I played before the battle even started. So was that from like the previous battle or something?
Well, in some cases, yeah, you'll have there are certain like art pieces in certain battlefields where, for example, you'll find soldiers who are frozen, who've been camped there and have died from the cold or something like this. So don't be surprised if you're playing in Eastern Europe and you've got, if you scan around your battlefield map, you find an example of a frozen guy next to his horse. Those kind of things do exist. If you've had an army parked there for a while, then potentially you can have, casualties and stuff around. But we kind of leave those little Easter eggs for you guys to find in the game.
Is there going to be more variety using natural terrain in Napoleon?
Yeah, you may have noticed from the battles you actually got to 4 for the fight, although I know a number of you obviously only got to your first couple of city battles. These guys are really fun to watch, by the way. It's one of those things where we've changed the parameters on the random terrain generation, right? So you'll get a lot more in terms of valleys and hills, and you'll get a lot less of that kind of flat, blank landscape stuff that you saw in Empire. It's interesting because you get some really cool kind of environment stuff pop out. It's not hugely, ununiform. Like you won't find huge, great cliffs, and then like a little valley down here or something. But you will find a lot more variation in height and in terms of where the kind of density of foliage is and rivers and stuff like that. So yes, you'll find more varied battlefields in that sense. The multiplayer maps have also been designed, so they're much more varied as well. And there's a larger number of those. You might have noticed when we were playing the battle at the beginning when we were choosing the map. There are all of the historical scenario battlefields, which are also obviously, artistically designed, are also available as multiplayer battlefields. So as well as all the multiplayer maps that are in there, which are 4 versus 4, you've got also all the historical maps too, and of course anything you play on the campaign map, which is randomly generated. So you should find there's a lot of variety. When you add to that each map has 4 seasons applied to it, so whereas before we had a spring, summer, autumn, winter 2-season model, we've now got this whole, right, this is spring, this is summer, this is autumn, this is winter, all the vegetation and stuff that's getting blown around, the snow, the weather, the rain, that's different for each map across the 4 different seasons. So, hopefully you'll find something fun there.